Hey guys, welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. My name is Brian,
And my name is Maggie.
and we interview Asian entrepreneurs around the world to amplify their voices and empower Asians to pursue their dreams and goals.
We believe that each person has a message and a unique story from their entrepreneurial journey that they can share with all of us.
Hey guys, this is our Asian Hustle Network podcast. My name is Brian,
And my name is Maggie.
and today we have Patrick Lee. He's the co-founder of Rotten Tomatoes. But Patrick's so much more than that. He's a serial entrepreneur who has extensive experience with designs, with huge expertise in tech and entertainment, an angel investor, an advisor, and an inspiration for us to follow. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Definitely. Patrick, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and how you got involved with the tech field and everything?
Sure. So I guess going back, my parents born in China, grew up in Taiwan, but they came to the U.S. for grad school.
Mm-hmm.
Then my dad was a assistant professor at UCLA, and I was born in LA.
Okay.
Until I was 5, and then we moved to Maryland when he got a job to become a full professor at University of Maryland. And then I was in Maryland through high school. Was interested in computers and stuff early, video games, all that kind of stuff, but also in junior high and in high school, I was in a magnet program that was around math, science, computer science. So we were, coding since junior high. Came to UC Berkeley for college, and that's when I started jumping into doing startups. So I left after 2 years to do a startup. Took another 10 years to graduate, so it took me 12 years to get my undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
But meanwhile, I was doing a number of different startups.
Definitely. That's a really good story too. And it comes to show, I think most people, especially the Gen Z generation that I talk to, they have a tendency to compare themselves to other people. They always believe that, hey, I got to finish school in 2.5 years. I got to finish school in 3 years. And in actuality, I think as long as you take your time and, walk your own path, don't compare to other people, you're going to end up being a lot happier, And just hearing that story too, I can already tell that you have you are the type of person that would follow your passions over money, and that kind of shows already. But you know what? I'm here at UC Berkeley. I'm not gonna I'm here to focus on what makes me happy. And you started a company at Berkeley, so hats off to that. So when you started Rotten Tomatoes, what was the original product market fit of the Rotten Tomatoes, and how did you pivot? Because we understood that you started this close to the .com boom in 2000. What was the original product market fit, and how did you pivot from that idea?
So before Rotten Tomatoes, I had a design firm
Mm-hmm.
that I founded with my co-founder, Stephen Wang. So two of us, we were doing a lot of web design work, or we call it interactive design, for the entertainment industry. So we were doing stuff for a lot of work for Disney Channel, making Flash games and websites.
Wow.
Warner Brothers, we were doing the official Jet Li site. We did the official Flash game for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which was a really popular game show at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And our creative director was this person, Sen Duong, and he was the one who actually came up with the idea for Rotten Tomatoes. He was a huge movie buff, and basically on the side, he was a huge Jackie Chan fan, and he wanted to know what everyone was saying about Rush Hour when it was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So he kind of came up with this idea. The idea was basically, when you open up a newspaper, you'd see this full-page ad. It would look like a movie poster filled with quotes.
Mm-hmm.
But those quotes would always be good, even if the movie was terrible.
Right.
So if the movie was good, it'd be like from famous film critics. But if it was bad, it would be sometimes fake quotes.
Oh, wow.
But a lot of times it would be like radio station DJs and just folks that weren't professional critics.
Yeah.
So his idea was, what if he only included professional critics, reviews from professional critics, but he included good and bad reviews and then have a score.
Mm-hmm.
And so he actually went from idea to launch in 2 weeks. It was built in static HTML, and he only covered the wide release movies that were out that week. So he didn't worry about covering in the past. He didn't worry about limited release movies or DVDs or things like that. So it was something that was manageable, that he could do by himself. I mean, it still took a ton of work to gather all those reviews, even for 3 or 4 movies that were coming out that week. but he was able to do it in 2 weeks. And back then, most reviews weren't even online. So he actually went to the library,
Oh, wow.
gather the reviews. He had to go out and literally get the newspapers and magazines, look up the review, write down a quote, and then go back to go work on it.
Oh, wow.
So when he launched it, we saw that there was product market fit almost immediately. Like, we were hosting the site for him, and within that year, it was featured on things like Netscape and Yahoo multiple times. Roger Ebert wrote an article within the first year where he picked his favorite movie websites, and he included Rotten Tomatoes.
That's awesome.
And within, I think it was like a month or two after launch, Pixar had a movie called A Bug's Life that came out. And the day it came out, there was a spike in traffic on Rotten Tomatoes, and we were like, what's going on? And when we looked at it, it was actually coming from Pixar itself. And it turned out that I think someone at Pixar found the page, sent it to everyone else at Pixar, and they were just constantly refreshing our page over and over.
Wow.
Which is why we saw a spike in traffic, because they wanted to see, as we're adding reviews, what is everyone saying about their movie?
Right.
So within that first year, after all these things happened, we're like, there's something there. We had already found product market fit. Like, let's turn this into a real business.
Yeah.
Right. And so what we did was we raised money. I went out and raised money for it, $1 million. We passed our design firm to another group to take over. And so we were kind of half transitioning out of our design firm, transitioning projects over to the other group to take over, and putting more resources into Rotten Tomatoes. And so the main things we were doing, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happened with the bubble bursting 2 months after we raised money, 9/11, 18 months after that, which were really tough. But essentially we didn't really have to pivot. We kept the same core product. We spent a few days to figure out what exactly is Rotten Tomatoes. And we realized the whole team met for 2 days, talked about it, and we decided it was to save people time and money from not seeing bad movies. Right? So we decided to focus only on movies and not go to other categories. And then what we spent our resources on was how do we take what's working and make it better? So we tried to automate the process a lot more and expand our coverage. So we first started doing parsing reviews to help bring them to one place. We built a content management system so that our editors, instead of in the past, they would have to go to each site, look it up. It was all brought to one place. They just had to go in and say, is this fresh or rotten? And really only in the cases where it wasn't clear. If it's 4 stars out of 4, or if it's like 1 star out of 4, you kind of know. But it's in the middle, like 2.5 stars out of 4. You'd have to go and read it to be like, is this actually fresh or rotten? Then they pick a quote. Everything else was like already handled. So it made it easier for us to cover movies. And then we eventually also built in a tool for critics to submit reviews directly. And later on, we expanded it to allow users to put their own reviews in. So all these things made it so we could be more accurate and save time so that we could cover more movies. And we eventually went to cover, limited release movies. We started going backwards to cover movies that were around before we started Rotten Tomatoes, more indie movies straight to DVD, a lot of stuff on DVD. So we were just trying to make what we already were doing better. We didn't actually have to pivot the product in any way.
Awesome. Oh. It's awesome that you were able to find the product market fit right off the bat.
Yeah. Actually, I feel like a lot of sites, the ones that work, they kind of just work, right?
Yeah.
They might pivot and try a couple things.
Yeah.
The one that works, I feel like most of the time it works right away. Like, you look at Odeo was not working, and then they tried Twitter from a hackathon, and it just kind of worked. Facebook worked, right? A lot of these ones, I think they come out almost immediately because they happened on something that just right time, right place, right product, and it just
So it seems like when you guys first started Rotten Tomatoes, you guys would have never expected it to turn out so big, right? But I think it was because you guys were so focused on your product and you knew exactly what your target audience was. That's why, people were able to automatically associate Rotten Tomatoes whenever they wanted to watch a movie, right?
I'm a huge fan of Rotten Tomatoes too, and I've been using it since I was in high school, Yeah. This is I can't believe I'm talking to you right now and interviewing you for this podcast, because we always automatically go to Rotten Tomatoes before we go out and watch any movie. This is back in high school. This is back in like 03, 04, 05.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So we started in 98.
Yeah.
We started running it as a business in 2000. But going back to what Maggie was saying, Sen was making something for himself, but he was a hardcore movie buff. And so what he made for himself actually worked for pretty much all hardcore movie buffs, because when you think back then, who's out there looking for reviews, like multiple reviews?
Yeah.
Hardcore people. Like an average person was just seeing the trailer on TV or in the movie theater, and maybe they might read like their local reviewer, and they probably wouldn't bother looking anywhere else.
Exactly.
But initially, it was the hardcore movie buffs, and it was basically Sen made something for himself, and it turned out it worked for other people.
That's awesome. And we have to give you a lot of recognition too, because you have to keep in mind that for our listeners listening, Patrick started us back in college. You know, that sense of maturity and focus that he had to understood what needed to come next. That's absolutely amazing. You know, I think back in college, if someone told me to leave college, I think my mom would just own me first. And then I'll be like, no, I gotta get a job, you know. But Patrick was so focused and has a strong vision what could be. That's amazing as a college student. So we want to understand, like, how were you raised to get to this point? You know, because I understand a lot of people were raised to play it safe, have a scarcity mindset that, hey, I should not take this risk because I don't know what's going to turn out of it. But for you, you're like, hey, you recognize opportunity and you seized it at such a young age. What was your upbringing like?
And I want to piggyback off that question too. As you were starting Rotten Tomatoes when you were in college, what were your parents, you know, their experience and their feedback on all of this? Like, what did they think of you, you know, starting a whole company while you were in still college?
Right. So my parents, at least on my mom's side, from what I understand, they were quite well off when they were in China, but when they fled to Taiwan because of the war, they had to get rid of everything. And so when they were in Taiwan, it was like 6, 7, 8 people all under one roof. My dad's family, I think, was also quite poor in Taiwan because they had to get rid of everything. So they were like lower class, all that stuff over there, but they were able to, but they all studied very hard. They, you know, education was a big priority for them. And so even within the same generation, they went from pretty much nothing to, you know, on both sides of my family, mom and dad's side, they all did quite well because of this emphasis on education. And so, you know, we grew up in, you know, middle-class-ish family, I'd say. Maybe, you know, it wasn't like we weren't super well off, but we were fine. We were comfortable. And I think the thing that they gave to me was they also emphasize education. I think that is something that happens for most Asian families, but they really emphasize that. And what I'm very thankful for is they gave me opportunities because they gave me the tools that I needed. I mean, I think if you didn't have education or like a poor education, it's just, you start off behind on everything, right? Like imagine if you couldn't add and subtract, how are you going to multiply and divide, and or even go into the, you know, things that build on top of that, right? Yeah. So they gave me basic tools to have the opportunity to do these things. And when I decided to try and do these companies, for instance, like your question, Maggie, my mom was like, please just finish school. You know, it's okay that you do all this, but please just finish school first. And I'm like, I really need to do this. My dad was actually like, oh, that's cool. That sounds cool. So he was totally fine with it. But then I told my mom, like, I really, you know, I will try and finish, but, you know, it took me 12 years, but I really want to do this right now. And she was okay with it. And actually for my design firm, which was, I guess, my second company, but the first one was relatively short-lived anyways, and it kind of flowed into the second one. But for the second company, her and my co-founder Steven's uncle, they loaned us the money to actually do the company, our design firm. So the two of them together loaned us $30K, which we were able to pay back within a year because we were getting clients almost immediately.
Right.
But yeah, so she wanted us to do it, but when we decided to do it anyways, she still supported us, which I think was really valuable. Like there's some parents, I think, that would potentially just straight up block you. They wouldn't allow you, and they wouldn't have given us, you know, a loan or whatever. Yeah. So that was really good. And so for me, when I went to finish school, again, it took me 12 years, and I graduated after we sold Rotten Tomatoes, right? Like I didn't need school to have done all that stuff. That was my third company was Rotten Tomatoes, right. But it was more to finish something I started, also kind of like because I promised my mom I would finish.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I know. So let's talk a little bit more about running Rotten Tomatoes too. I think that's a really important lesson, especially given the COVID situation that's going on right now. We have read some of your stories in the past where you raised $1 million over 20 people, and you decided to not pay yourself anymore, and you're living at work, literally hiding, putting your clothes behind 3 cubicles. That story, like, it's very valuable to hear what your mindset was, because that essentially puts you in a situation where you had to be resourceful and you had to improvise and you had to think about stuff like, should we bootstrap or should we raise money? But I think in your case, most likely it falls to the bootstrap area. Like, can you walk us through that moment? What kind of emotions you were feeling? What are your thought processes like? What did you tell your team when you're like, hey, look, we had to cut down our staff for our companies to survive, and we'll replace your salary with equity? What was that mindset like?
Sure. So yeah, we raised money so Rotten Tomatoes started in August 1998 is when Sen launched it. We decided to try and raise money to run it as a real company in January 2000. So a little bit after a year later. The internet bubble burst in 2000. And I want to say 90% of all tech companies went out of business. I mean, I don't have the exact number, but it felt like that. I mean, everyone was going out of business because after the bubble burst, you couldn't raise money anymore, right? And on top of it, most companies were dependent on ad revenue.
Right.
The majority of them were. That's mostly the business model that everyone was doing.
Yeah.
And what was happening was people were raising money and then buying ads from each other to get more traffic. Right? So it's just internet companies buying from other internet companies. And once the market crashed and they couldn't raise money, they couldn't go and buy traffic anymore. And so what would happen was it was going from $5 to $20 CPM, like $5 to $20 per 1,000 impressions, to like pennies or fractions of a penny on the dollar. So you couldn't raise funding and your revenue went to near zero, almost overnight. And so that's why so many companies went out of business. The ones that survived were like things like eBay or Amazon that made money from users. Right? They could actually make it through. But almost all the ones focused on advertising died. And so we knew at that point, like, we had to reduce our cost, because when we just started running Rotten Tomatoes, we had no revenue. We managed to get a deal with a group called My Simon right before the deal, everything crashed. And that kind of gave us some initial revenue to help keep us in business. But we knew we had to cut, like our cost was way too high, especially because we were offloading our design firm and the revenue that was coming from that side. So we tried to do it in the best way possible. So we told people that we needed to cut, and we explained why. We accelerated vesting for all of them. So they all had, like, every single person had some equity, even the ones we had to let go. We asked them to start looking. And we basically tried to keep everyone employed until they could find something. And we were lucky because our team was so good that they were actually able to find something, even in very bad times, quite quickly.
Right.
So we had to cut from 25 people to 7 within a year.
Wow.
And when we got to 7, even at 7, 5 people took a 30% pay cut, and myself and our marketing person, Paul, went to 0. And so we had 7 people, but it was really the cost of more like 3 or 4, right? We gave people additional equity to make up for the lack of salary. And we left it up to each person on how much they could reduce.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, again, the way I did it was because our office, we had a nice office space that we couldn't get out of the lease. We had space for 25 people. And suddenly we had 7, right? So I just took over 3 cubes that were in an L shape, put all my stuff in there, moved out of my apartment, and just moved into the office. I mean, it was actually illegal, but I just looked at it as working really, really late combined with getting into the office really, really early.
Were there other people staying at the office as well?
There's a lot of times when it was like we were really busy on certain things, people would stay over, or sometimes we were playing video games till really late.
Right.
But no, I mean, I was the only one who actually was there for a period of time. The other thing we also did was we ended up subleasing a third of the office to another friend's company that also they cut from 130 people down to 10. And they ended up subleasing like a part of our office space. And so that also helped cut costs down.
Wow.
Well, it's a
sorry, also real quickly, I forgot to mention. So also 9/11 was 18 months after that. So that was super tough. And
how did that affect Rotten Tomatoes?
Because at that point, a lot of folks were cutting advertising spend. People didn't really want to see ads during such a period.
Yeah,
I remember specifically, we had a deal had an ad campaign for Spider-Man, and it had to be, Spider-Man got pushed back because they had to go and digitally edit out the Twin Towers.
Oh, wow.
Because it was in the movie, and they had to cut it out, and so they had to push it back. I think in that case, they still advertised with us, but it was, pushed back quite a while.
Right.
And it was just a really tough time again. And it was, I believe, the worst terrorist attack ever, or the US, and the bubble bursting was also one of the worst crashes ever, especially within tech. It might have been one of the worst or the worst.
It was like back to back.
Yeah.
But the thing is, now with COVID, I think it might be worse than both of those things combined. That's how bad everything is now. And the one thing that really kept us alive back then was we massively cut our cost. Right? So because you can only control revenue so much, and in our case, revenue was going to be near zero for a long time because of what happened. Similar to here, if you're like in the restaurant business or something like certain things like retail, your revenue probably has gone to zero or near zero. Maybe you can do deliveries or something, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing, you can't really control revenue much, but you can control your cost. And so I think a lot of folks did it where they had to furlough almost everyone.
Yeah.
Right? But that even for startups, when I've been mentoring, advising people in this period, I've been telling everyone like cash is king. Like, that's the one thing that's going to get you through this. You need at least minimum a year, ideally 18 to 24 months. If you have anyone you can raise money from at this point, it's obviously going to be much harder unless you're doing something that's helping with COVID. Like raise it if you can. Like don't worry about anything else. Just raise it if you can. At the same time, cut like hard and cut fast. Ideally only do one cut. Don't do lots of small cuts because people are going to like look over their shoulder and expect it's going to kill morale. But do one big one and do it quickly, because the thing is, if you could cut your costs in half and you had 5 months left, you would get 10 months.
Right.
But if you wait 3 months and then decide to cut in half, you only gain 2 months, right? So by doing it earlier, you conserve cash more. And so it's super important. That's what got us through back then. But I think that's what's going to get people through now. Like they have to do it. And it's hard, but if you don't do it, you're dead.
Yeah. It goes back to being a leader too. You have to make this quick decision, decisive decision really, really quickly. Otherwise, it'll harm your business in the long run too.
Yeah. And I think that's why so many small businesses are struggling at this moment, right? Because a lot of these small businesses don't even have a lot of cash on hand.
Yeah.
And for example, restaurants, like their net profit is already small to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. Do you feel like, based upon what you went through, like when you first started raising money in early 2000s and 18 months later, 9/11, do you feel like that has impacted your decision to sell the company 4 years later? Or did you have other factors involved as well?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think, it might be an excuse, but because those two things happened, like literally right as we raised money, and it was the only time we raised money, because my first two companies, first one was just some savings. The second one was a loan. We never raised money from them. And they weren't startups. They weren't the kind of things that you're supposed to raise money for, right? But for us, because we raised money and right away that happened, I want to say that it made us, like we were just focused on surviving. We weren't really thinking big. And even though we had something that was growing and we realized like it was growing, I don't think we totally appreciated how good it was. And so we were getting offers actually probably within 2 years in or so from people trying to buy it for really cheap. I mean, it was literally 10 cents on a dollar, 25 cents on a dollar from our post-money valuation. And we, let our investors know that these offers were coming in. And our investors were like, yeah, go and take it. Because they had lost everything else they invested in during that time went to zero. Right? But we're like, no, we think we should at least sell where you can get your money back, at least get all your money back. And that was literally the bar we had. And looking back, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like we actually made them some money, but not much.
Yeah.
Because we had our bar so low. And literally that's the difference between, if we just waited even an extra year or two, we probably would have had multiple times more in terms of what we could sell for. But I think a combination of one, we just weren't thinking big. Two, because the reason why I did all my companies was I wanted to do something with friends from college. All 6 companies had at least one co-founder, if not more, from freshman year of college. And I wanted to do something interesting. So they were all something that I thought would be cool to do. And that was my main reason to do them. So I think partly it's my fault. I just didn't have that same level of ambition. And partly it was because of the time period and what happened with the market crashing and 9/11. Just made us think smaller. And that's, I think, the difference between, something like what happened with us and someone that might have had a much, much bigger, financial success, is that they just thought much bigger. They thought they were just much more ambitious.
Yeah. So given that you have always been an entrepreneur, and you've started building companies since college, I'd love to know, how your mindset was affected while you were building out your first few companies up until when you built out Rotten Tomatoes.
And after Rotten Tomatoes too, we understood your mindset, given all the stuff that was going on, totally understandable. I think we still see a lot of posts in Asian Hustle Network about people want to sell their companies right now. They want to sell their businesses. So that, we can't exactly, it's not exactly your fault. I think it's a situational thing where it's oh man, I just want to get people's money back, because as you're taking other people's money, you're you feel obligated to return their mony back. So completely understand, Patrick. No, there's no right or wrong decision, but we felt you kind of made the right decision, because I feel like the way you are right now, you're a strong mentor, you're a strong advisor, you're an angel investor now. There's so much knowledge that you had to give to all of us listening from you. And going back to what Maggie said too, you want to understood what you took from Rotten Tomatoes and what you learned from there, and how did you apply for the next several businesses. What worked the first time, what didn't work the second time as you're starting more companies.
So ironically, I think, a couple things. My goal was to try and do things with friends and do something that I liked doing. Actually, we would have been better off just keeping the team together and not selling. Because looking back, those were among the best times of my life.
Yeah.
Even though it's hard and we're going through such hard times, because it was so hard, it actually pulled everyone closer.
Yeah.
And they were literally like family. Our CFO was our company mom, Lily. Her 2 sons were our age, the age of all the people in our company.
Yeah.
Right? So she was the company mom. One of our editors, Susan, she ended up marrying my brother. So she's actually my sister.
That's crazy.
And then Sen, who was the creator of Rotten Tomatoes, he ended up marrying the cousin of another editor. So they're cousin-in-laws. Literally, people are actually family.
I love that. Yeah.
And so that's one thing, looking back, that if my goal was to do stuff with friends, I actually should have just kept with that group, because it was really such an amazing group of friends. And in terms of business-wise, even if we never sold, yes, if we timed it better, we could have sold for probably a lot more money. But even if we didn't sell, Rotten Tomatoes was growing in traffic. It could have been just a great business in terms of just from the revenue it could have generated. Or even if we wanted to do more things, hypothetically, for example, when we transitioned Design Reactor, had I known, again, you can't tell the future, but had I known we would have had to lay off 18 people, great people, we would have been better off not giving up our design firm and just being if we could have, we did it because we were worried we couldn't focus. Right. But had we split off the design firm to people from the team and say, you guys take it over and you run it, and we keep it totally separate, we'll never pull from one side to the other. Right. Maybe someone like Lily could have done both, right? They could have done it, And we probably wouldn't have had to let go of so many people because some of them could have maintained a design firm. Some would go on Rotten Tomatoes, right? Yeah. And looking back, our design firm was great. We were doing some really big projects already. You know, pretty much anything at that time, our team pretty much could have done it. And with Rotten Tomatoes, all that traffic, it's like we could have built anything and we would have had traffic to flow to it. It's like we had all these amazing pieces and we, through bad luck and bad decisions, we got rid of both, you know? So that's another thing. I think actually when you look at entrepreneurs, the best entrepreneurs for the most part are not serial entrepreneurs. They're actually the one-time founders that find something good and they do it the whole time. Like Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, the Google people, like the biggest ones, they only did one, right? And there are some rare cases like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, but Steve Jobs would have been Apple the whole time if he didn't get kicked out. Right. He only did those other ones because he got kicked out and suddenly had all this time on his hands.
Yeah.
Right? And then moving forward for me, I think with Rotten Tomatoes, in a way, it actually made things worse because when we sold, we were like, oh, we know what we're doing. I know what I'm doing. I can do something bigger. And so with the later ones, actually ended up raising more money and tried to do things bigger. But actually by doing things bigger, I was less focused on all those companies. And so I actually did a much worse job. Rotten Tomatoes, because the product was initially focused, and even though we raised money, the market crashed 9/11, it forced us to stay focused. Right. Without that, we might have started adding a bunch more features and other things that were like not relevant, or we might have tried going into more categories and things like that.
Yeah.
Later companies, I was a lot less focused because I had more resources. I thought I knew what I was doing, but actually I was making the biggest mistake possible, which is to be unfocused.
Yeah, and there's so many options. Like you think you can do everything because there's problems in every segment, right? So it's like you're more unfocused in those later companies.
Yeah, and the one thing I realized from that experience, it was actually from my failures of the next 3 companies I did after Rotten Tomatoes, was that I was so unfocused. And I only realized it from helping a bunch of startups after my last company died. And I was constantly telling them like, hey, you need to focus, you're doing too much. And then I realized like, oh crap, I was doing too much in my last few companies. And then when I started looking at all my tech founder friends and every kind of company I could think of, every single one that did well was focused in the beginning. And so that's actually the big thing whenever I mentor now, I just stay on that topic because, you know, anyone who's unfocused is dead.
Yeah.
And it's only the focused ones that actually make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really great that you're so humble about it too. You know, you now looking back, everything now kind of makes sense, right? As you're reflecting, as you're learning, you're coming a lot of lessons learned to like teach other people to like not repeat the same mistakes. But it makes me think about stuff like when you're first beginning, you have to be a lot more resourceful because you don't have a lot of resources around you. That in itself would incubate innovation, new ideas, doing things, attacking quickly, changing directions. Because I feel like, you know, I talk to a lot of other tech founders too, that when you have a lot of resources, you kind of just rely on that. You're like, I can make this mistake. It's fine. I got enough talent and money and resources to recover. But over time, these things would cause cracks in your organization because you're not immediately like repairing the cracks that they create when you innovate and you have a lot of innovation. So after the sale of your Rotten Tomatoes in 2004, you know, you spent 9 years in Asia, right? So you spent some time in Hong Kong. What was that experience? What caused you to move to Asia? We understand that you always wanted to move to Asia. Like, what was the bigger underlying reason behind it? Did you want to experience something new? Did you want to go out there and start a new company? Did you want to go out there, start a new life? Like, what was that time period like?
Yeah, so for me, you know, again, growing up in the state, being born and growing up in the States.
Yeah.
In Maryland, elementary school and stuff, there weren't a lot of Asians. You know, in junior high and high school with magnet programs, yes, there were more Asians. But you know, there's times when I grew up and I felt sort of invisible in a lot of cases. I mean, I specifically remember sometimes I had some friends, really good friends that were not Asian. And like, for instance, in 6th grade, I remember the really popular girl in our elementary school was doing a like graduation party.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out from my best friend at the time, because he was like, hey, are you going to go to the party? And I was like, I didn't even hear about it. And he was like, oh, well, let me try asking. And I know he must have asked. And then he didn't mention it again. So I'm guessing she said no. Right. And I had a lot of experiences like that.
Yeah.
And so junior high and high school were much better because there were a lot more Asians in these programs. So I started feeling a lot more comfortable. And why did I pick Berkeley? I mean, Berkeley is famous for having a huge Asian undergraduate population. I mean, that's literally the number one reason. I was like, I want to go to a place where I'm not just an invisible minority, right?
Right.
And then from there, I started gaining a lot more confidence in high school and then a lot more in college. And then after we sold Rotten Tomatoes, I was like, I want to see what it's like to be, you know, in Asia, in China and Hong Kong, where I would be the majority.
Right.
And so I went over there. But then, ironically, the thing that happened was when I went over there, within almost instantly, I realized like, oh, I'm actually super different from them. Like, I literally don't have to say anything. Like, I don't even open my mouth, and they can tell like I'm not from there. They're like, where are you from?
Definitely.
And then the thing I realized while I was in Asia was that I'm a minority everywhere. Because if I go to Asia, I'm still this weird Westerner person. And if I'm here, I'm a minority. Right. And then it actually was good because I started just accepting it and just realizing like, this is who I am and just being okay with that.
Yeah. Which is why it's like an ongoing issue with so many Asians, right? We're always trying to find our place and find our voice, but we really have to embrace, you know, who we are and where we live and, you know, who we interact with.
Yeah. That's kind of the problem that we're trying to solve with Asian Hustle Network too. To realize, you know, we get about 150 to 200 pending posts every day.
Wow.
Probably like 60% of those is like, I'm so happy I'm in this community because I can't find my identity. You know, it seems to be an ongoing thing, whether, you know, it's for you or some like newer generations. You know, it's really important to find your tribe too. But the bigger thing is you have to know who you are. You know, you have to be comfortable under your own skin. It goes a long way when not just social interactions and finding your identity, but also doing business too. You know, the more comfortable you are, the better you are at making good decisions, and you know, you're more honest with yourself because you're not lying to yourself. Like, you're not gonna be like, things are so great when everything's like burning down. You know? But yeah, it's pretty cool to hear that you spent some time in Hong Kong because Maggie's from Hong Kong.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think we were there a year or two ago, and we absolutely loved it. You know, the culture's great, the food's great.
Wait, during the riots and stuff, or
it was right before?
Okay.
You know what the funny thing is? So we left like a week before the riots, and then earlier this year we left Europe a week before the COVID lockdown.
Oh wow, you guys were just totally dodging bullets.
No idea, by the way. It's not intentional.
Although ironically, if you're in Hong Kong now, you're probably safer.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
That's very true.
That's the funny thing too. So after spending 9 years in Asia and coming back to the US in 2014, right? Or 2015? Was that the year?
2013.
13. What was I mean, obviously you moved back because of family, but after you moved back here, you know, changing cultures twice, living in Asia for 9 years and living in the United States all your life. Now you're back in the United States, you're like, oh man, what helped you decide what you wanted to do next? Was it, did you immediately want to like make a strong connection, find a network, a new tribe to start a new business with? What was the process like when you first got back to the United States, and what did you want to do? And how did you sort that part out?
Yeah, when I got back, a lot of it was just kind of reconnecting with friends, kind of reestablishing my network here. So one thing I did was I actually started when I was in Hong Kong, but I created a group for tech founders and brought in different tech founder friends. They could refer other people, kind of like Asian Hustle Network, but very private.
Yeah.
And you know, now it's like 150, you know, really amazing tech founders in that group.
Yeah.
So that helped. I ended up doing a company with a friend that I did my first company with. So company number 6 and company number 1 were with a friend, Liao Fong.
Yeah.
And we loved playing video games our whole lives. And when we were hanging out, we decided to try and do a company to make mobile games. So the two of us went and did that for a while. Unfortunately, it didn't work, but it was very fun. And, you know, anyone who loves video games probably has thought in the past, like, oh, I'd
Right.
love to make my own video game. So we actually
Right.
did that. But yeah, it was definitely an adjustment to come back because, and I think it's really interesting to live in another country. I feel like everyone should live at least a year in another country because it gives you a much wider view. Because growing up in the States, you always just feel like the US is best at everything.
Yeah.
Then you realize like, oh, there's a lot of good here. You know, like the tech companies, the entertainment stuff we make is amazing, but there's also problems. Like one thing coming back from Hong Kong, you know, obviously I wasn't there during the riots or all that stuff, but Hong Kong, when I was there, was incredibly safe. Like you could go anywhere, anytime by yourself, and you don't even think about danger. Like your spider sense is never on, not on at all. And then I come back to the Bay Area, and you can't even walk through most parts of San Francisco without like looking around a little bit to be like, just to know your environment. Because I mean, many times since being back, you know, you have homeless people come up and are trying to start fights with you, or like getting in your face, yelling racist things and stuff. And you can't, you don't engage, you just ignore and try and walk faster. Right. And that doesn't happen like ever in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And you know, you look at Singapore, Japan, like these places are ridiculously safe, right? They're much cleaner. Like Hong Kong, you go in like the airport, the transportation system, the MTR. It's so like you go to here and it's like BART. A lot of these things really like I was, you know, like a homeless person came up and tried to assault me in the BART, and my friend had his notebook literally grabbed out of his hand in the BART, and the person ran out. I mean, like, and these are things that like I didn't notice when I was only living in the US, but after coming back from Asia, you can't help but notice it. Where it's like suddenly you have this like your spider sense has to be on all the time. You have to like be aware of your surroundings, and actually that's like a little bit like a low level anxiety that when you're in Asia it just doesn't happen. And it's actually really nice to be in a place where you don't have to worry about those things. And then obviously with all the stuff with the politics now and everything, and or even our response to what's happening with COVID, like there are definitely countries that are doing a much better job. I mean, most Asian countries like Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea are handling it much better and not letting politics and all this other stuff mix in. And it was a massive adjustment. Also just coming back to the States and kind of a little bit feeling that invisible thing happening again.
Right.
And I've been trying to be really involved with groups, you know, like Gold House or supporting, you know, Rock the Boat or with you guys, because I feel it's really important. And to me, one thing I realized when I was in Asia and coming back is that what's super important is having positive role models in media, like in front of the camera. And when you're in Asia, almost all TV and film is with Asian people in all roles. But when you look at any Western media, I mean, even within Europe, Australia, you know, here, typically if you see Asians in anything, it's very stereotypical. Like always computer programmers, the kung fu guys, the working massage parlor girls, you know, things like that. Or it's like even the stuff that's imported, it's going to be like Jet Li, Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, who I love all those folks, but it's still kung fu, you know, it's still guys, I mean, outside Bruce Lee that have no romantic relationships, you know, or it's like anime, you know, that's the kind of stuff that gets imported. Like most of the other stuff, I mean, like Parasite now, but it's still quite rare. And I think the big difference over there, or even what I heard about Latin American countries, like I've heard are much more accepting of Asians because they actually get Asian dramas. I think like Korean dramas and things like that, where almost everyone in South America is watching that stuff like at least once a day. It's regular programming. And I think when you see that, it's just a big difference in how people think about you and how we think about ourselves.
Right.
And that it's something it's getting better, but it's still quite bad.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I just like to give feedback on it. about, you know, you moving to Asia and then coming back to the US. It's very similar to my situation because I actually was born and raised in San Francisco. You know, the whole homeless situation, like it's always been a problem in my whole 28 years of living, but I've never like dawned it as a problem because I've always just like kept walking straight ahead. Like I've never like paid attention to my surroundings because I didn't want to, you know, like look at it, you know. And Brian coming from LA to the Bay Area, it's like a whole new world to him. And he's like, why are the streets of San Francisco
Why is it so
like
dangerous
this?
here?
And I'm
LA also has some stuff too, like
but he's from like the Asian area of LA, so it's very safe. But to me, I'm like, really, there's no problem, you know, like I don't see it as a problem. I just ignore it, you know. I pretend like the problem is not there. And I like your perspective. And like, if you move to Asia, you know, going to Hong Kong, I never felt like I was in danger. You know, I think a lot of places other than US are much more safer than the US. But then every other country, they praise US. They're like, oh, US is like moving at such a quick pace. You know, they're so much better. You know, we have a lot of Australians in Asian Hustle Network who praise United States. And they're like, why are you guys like moving so fast? Like we're always trying to catch up with you guys. You know, entrepreneurs in the US are so incredible. I wish I could be more like you guys. You know, but that's not true at all. There's entrepreneurs everywhere. You know, we're all moving at a speed that's, you know, very fast. And there are skilled and educated people everywhere, you know. And about the whole film industry, that's very true. Like with Parasite, like these movies are being praised whenever, you know, they win awards and Grammys and everything like that. But we're trying to move to an area where it's normalized, right? But we're so far from that. We are moving in the right direction, but we need to get to a place where it's normalized. And we should still celebrate, you know, whenever these movies are coming out starring Asians. But it's always, we're still in a place where it's like, oh, there's a movie starring Asians, like that's very rare, you know. And we need to, and Gold House is like doing such an incredible job with that, with Crazy Rich Asians.
Hats off to that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah,
you guys
I totally agree.
Yeah, so, you know, we do share a lot of similarities too, because we started Asian Hustle Network because we wanted more people in mainstream media, more people in corporate and investment ladders. That's our 3 criteria that we formed the group on, and people just kind of resonated around our core values and our name, I guess, because people are like, hey, the word hustle and Asians kind of go together, you know? That's pretty good. So we do share a lot of your core values that we believe that we can make a difference. And well, oftentimes, like Maggie and I look at each other and be like, are we too foolish? Like, are we thinking too big? You know? And we try to, you know, listen to people like yourself and try to remain more focused. So there's a lot of times where, you know, you get opportunities come to you almost on a daily basis. Hey, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this.
Yeah.
But most of the time for us, I think in a good way, is that we're also kind of lazy. So we're like, you know what, we're just gonna focus on our vision. You know, like anything else can add on to our vision, we'll do it. If it doesn't focus to our vision, we won't do it, you know. And it just goes back to the focus thing that you mentioned before, you know. I think a couple months into the group, it was so chaotic. Like we're getting people posting about different industries and just selling their stuff, promoting their stuff, sharing their stories. We realized that, you know what made us special was our product market fit to resonate with the Asian culture in not just the United States, but around the world. You know, what happens is we had something beautiful happen. People are starting to connect with each other based on our underlying morality or values or beliefs that, you know, prior to Asian Hustle Network, we couldn't find anything else that united the Asian population. We found Koreans, Japanese, very segregated. But now that I see people of different ethnic groups support each other, it makes me really happy because now we're trying to unite everyone under the same umbrella. You know, we're not different. We're the same. We're just say different things. You know, it's just growing up and especially our generation too, because our parents came from a time of war. My parents came to the United States because of the Vietnam War. And because of that, they do have a lot of resentment against like other ethnic race. And they're like telling me, hey, you shouldn't trust this, you shouldn't trust that. But growing up in, you know, the most Asian place in LA, Arcadia, you know, I was like, everyone's the same as me, Mom. What makes them so different? You know, and that's always been a philosophy too. It's always been Maggie's philosophy. She grew up in the most Asian area in SF, Sunset. You know?
Yeah.
So we just wanted to bridge everything together, and seeing your work, it's almost like a blueprint for us to follow, you know, because we fully believe that success leaves clues. And when you come back and it's ironic that you say you feel invisible, you're the first person we notice. They're like, oh, Patrick Lee. You know? So it's a little bit ironic that you feel that way. And you're not the only one feeling that way. And we want to make sure that everyone feels like they have a place to belong. And that's kind of our goal.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
No, yeah, I mean, the stuff that you guys have done is incredible. It's really good. I think you've built a really good community, and it's great that you're putting a lot more resources into keeping to growing it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely appreciate that, Patrick. And I think we're almost at the top of the clock. Do you have any important, like anything that you want to say to our audience before we end the call?
I would say if anyone needs help or mentoring or support, you know, they can always find me on LinkedIn. If you do Rotten from Rotten Tomatoes Doubt, then just feel free to reach out, say that they've heard this podcast or found me on Asian Hustle Network or something, and happy to try to give some advice or mentoring to them.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for us all to continue supporting each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very important. Thanks so much for coming on. We loved your story and your insight.
I feel like we know Patrick so much more well now. We love it.
Yeah. And hopefully when everything is less crazy, we can all meet up in person.
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Patrick.
All right, thanks so much.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the show.
We would like to get to the top 10 on iTunes, so be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We release an episode every single Wednesday, so stay tuned.
Thank you guys so much.